Get started. My name is Barb Smith from LDC. I'm the Director of Partnerships and Professional Development here. I'm going to put the PowerPoint in presentation mode. I'd like to welcome all of you and invite you to introduce yourself in the chat. Please put your name and state. I've counted West Coast, East Coast, Mississippi, Florida, all different kinds of folks here. New York, Pennsylvania. I've seen Kentucky, California, Colorado. So those are just a few. Alabama in the house also. So just nice to see everybody. Please just go ahead, put your name and stay in the chat. You know, let us know why you took a time out for this hour. And I'm going to go ahead and get us kicked off. I know that my colleague, nicknamed the Amazing Abby, is recording, and we'll go ahead and get started. For those of you who are joining the virtual coach call for the first time, we have 2 virtual meetings that are occurring throughout the school year, about 4 to 5 times. One is coach-oriented. We consider coaching a behavior, not a job title. You could be a full-time classroom teacher who's leading PLCs, working with your colleagues. We would consider you a coach as much as we would consider someone who is a full-time district or a network coach to be in that role. The other virtual meetings that we run are community meetings that are geared towards site leads, folks who may have some administrative responsibilities, and maybe a little bit less in the trenches as you, but there's a big overlap we find among these groups. All of the meetings are recorded, and you're able to access the resources through the LDC Partner Toolkit. The coach meeting, at the coach meeting, we really try to give you something that you can try or share right away with your colleagues, and that our focus is on supporting your daily work. This month's meeting is really talking about making the most of professional learning communities, or PLCs. You'll find that as we find that face-to-face time is increasingly hard to get, that many PLCs are becoming virtual to some extent, as well as the PLCs that we have in common planning time in a school or a school district. The activities that we share today lend themselves very nicely to both environments, whether you're working virtually or employing this in your school district. We're also finding more and more that professional learning is transcending brick and mortar, that folks may begin something at a grade level meeting, participate in G-Chats or Google community or teaching channel community, using core tools to carry the conversation on in after hours until they get back together again. So more and more we're seeing, you know, in this Twitter and Facebook age, that professional learning communities are not bounded by our brick and mortar world. I'd like to welcome you, and we're going to focus our conversation around PLCs first in LDC's I3 funded grant schools that are happening in LA and New York. I'm going to then turn it over to Danielle Brewer and Kimber Rael, who work with our virtual coaching program and coach credentialing, and they're going to model a feedback session that you can take and use right away. And then we're going to close with some updates of coming events and turn you loose. I'd like to turn it over to my colleagues, Megan Jensen, Barbara Brown, and also to Jen Barry and Christine Del Negro, to talk about the work that they're doing with virtual PLCs.
Thanks, Barb.
And
so Barbara is sharing her screen and setting us up here. While she's doing that, I'll send my greetings. Yeah, you can see there are names. We've met some people on this call, and some were e-meeting today. You've heard a little bit about LDC's federal I-3 grant-funded work that's happening in New York City Department of Education schools, as well as Los Angeles Unified School District schools. So Barbara, myself, and two of our colleagues and friends from New York will share a little bit about our virtual PLC structure, about some of the sequencing, planning, or pacing plans that we're using to support teacher groups in using LDC's tools, resources, courses, and coaching to build their writing assignments. And we'll hear a little bit from Christine Del Negro, one of our coaches, and Jen Berry, a teacher leader in New York, about how they're differentiating the learning plans that we have, as well as the resources to specifically fit their needs. So here's an example visual for you of the learning plans that we at LDC have created for each PLC. So you can picture, you're looking at a screenshot from Teaching Channel, which is where we have hosted the learning plans. And these learning plans take PLCs through multiple cycles of writing modules and then teaching them, or alternatively finding existing modules in the Core Tools library that they can adapt for their student populations and then use. And our learning plans also focus on helping coaches, help teachers determine if they take an individual approach to creating and using modules, or if they want to try a common approach where they share things like the same standards, the same products, same texts across classrooms. So you can see here, our learning plan moves week by week, and it provides guidance to PLCs to do a few things. In particular, our focus is on engaging with LDC course content and then also planning, whether applying that content to planning, whether it's individually or in small groups or as whole groups. So you can picture that our coaches are joining the PLCs virtually through Zoom, much as we are, and then teachers and PLCs will meet in person in a room together, or actually Zoom in from their own classrooms as well. So Christine, I'll hand it over to you to share a little bit about how you have differentiated this learning plan for one of your schools. Are you there?
I am.
Hey.
Can you hear me?
Yep, loud and clear.
So I'm actually finding that I'm differentiating really for almost everybody because, you know, it's the same as you would find in a classroom. Everybody works at their own pace, and some schools are having challenges outside of LDC that have affected their progress, and others are not. So it's really all about working with teachers where they are and making sure that I'm supporting them so that they can do the work. So, you know, the differentiation can come in various ways. Sometimes it's as simple as just taking a given meeting and truncating it because I know that the teachers need more time to spend on discussion. So I'll look at the coursework and just highlight a couple of key points and then kind of guide them to apply it to their work and have conversation around it. Sometimes it's moving steps around. What I'm finding right now that I'm doing is I've been noticing that my teachers are doing really great work, but getting them to document it in Core Tools is still a challenge. I think like I've done a really great job this year of getting them to get started in Core Tools, which is an improvement over last year, and I've kind of gotten them over that hump. But still, the comfort level isn't where I want it to be, so they'll end up making modifications offline, and then it's not documented. So one thing that I'm doing after the New York City February break for several PLCs is doing what I'm calling a housekeeping meeting, where it's like, we're just going to spend time. I want everything uploaded to Core Tools. Let's make sure it's all there, and let's kind of just talk through where you are. I'm able to do that because in New York State we have testing in March, and so it's going to be sort of a lag time in the teaching, so we can do that and then have the rest of March to plan the upcoming module for April. So, okay, you know, that's just something that I'm doing. It's working in New York City. It might not work someplace else. And then there are other PLCs that aren't there yet, so I'm just pushing them along because they need to teach a module like right when they get back from break, so that their plan looks a little bit different.
Yeah, thanks for sharing. So as I listen to you talk, I hear what you're really doing is you're curating, the LDC resources so that you can best tailor a professional learning process for the teachers in each PLC.
Yeah.
So some you might focus on just getting those focus standards selected and getting the language of those standards in the task for 2 sessions, right? You might draw them to some parts of course 1. You might hand pick a video from the course, something like that.
Right.
For other groups, you've scooted them along much faster, but you've identified that they need an additional session to build comfort and familiarity with using the platform. But on the whole, what I'm hearing in listening to you talk and what I hear from a lot of coaches is, it's the zooming out and thinking this is a professional learning process. I've got my sequencing, right, of the learning that I want to move my teachers through. How I differentiate the pacing or make some accommodations, for instance, taking that time to stop and become more familiar with where to find standards or how to upload student work. That's your work being a responsive coach as you're moving people along that process. So.
But also, and I'd like to just kind of give a shout out to Barbara Brown, because one of the things that she's been encouraging me to do is, like, let's get dates into the meetings so that everybody knows what the deliverables are, and because we need to keep our eye on that too. Mm-hmm. So within that structure, how am I differentiating? But with my eye on the fact that these are the goals that we need to have accomplished by the end of the year. It's probably going to look different for each PLC as far as maybe the depth of the planning process, but I need to get them there.
Yeah, thanks for sharing that. And I'd love to hear from other coaches in the chat about how you've differentiated your learning plans for your schools, whether you're working virtually in our I3 project or working in person with people in your contexts. As Christine said, a huge part also has just been viewing this as a pacing plan. This is the sequencing of our work, our professional learning process together. Let's put dates against what we're doing, but then let's tailor it based on what our learning needs are. So.
Yeah, and Megan, to add on, I just want to say that having these due dates in there really brings administrators into the work as well, because they know what teachers are doing on a weekly basis. So they know, if they walk into a PLC meeting, this is what's happening, and they know what the deliverables will be as well.
Completely, yeah.
I think that really helps them to think about what meetings I might want to drop into. If I can't go to all of them, and I think it's good to kind of take a step back. And one of the questions I would put in the chat for folks who is this idea of when you're working in a professional development project, there's an arc, whether it's a year, 6 months, whether you have individual grade level plans. How do you make transparent the learning goals, the deliverables, and also to have the resources archived in a way that's very user-friendly. And I think that's one of the things you've really done with the idea of learning plans. No matter what you call them, folks, in Kentucky or Colorado, this idea of giving adults a professional learning agenda that can be customized, but that is living. We're more likely to keep our promises to each other in terms of bringing student work and all of that if we have that advance notice and have things set up.
Completely. Mm-hmm. Thank you. So keeping in mind that process that we're moving teachers through, we did want to share with you some structures that we have found drive more successful PLCs. Keeping in mind that our coaching is taking place through the virtual realm. Coaches are joining PLCs via Zoom. Teachers may be in person in the same room or may all be joining Zoom from their classrooms as well. So we have been learning from PLCs that are working closely with their coaches to progress along that learning plan. And this is our short list of the most successful practices that we're seeing across those PLCs. So what leads to that deep teacher learning, to teachers understanding what the goal of the meeting is and getting to that deliverable for the day. some basic ones that we all know, being able to start meetings on time. In particular, the large thing we're finding for those of you that are embarking upon virtual work or that are deep into it yourself is the need to operationalize an in-person lead. So I know we've got Miss Barry on the call here, and she's one of those people. So a teacher leader on campus who is really able to be that co-facilitator, that co-coach, along with the LDC coach who's joining virtually. And that person is often really critical in having kind of those step back conversations with the coach so that they can look at that learning plan and really tailor it to connect it to teacher learning needs or student learning needs. That's kind of one of the larger practices I'd wanted to point some attention to on our list here. That also can really drive that, we call that person the project liaison, but that teacher leader in person. This can really help them begin to co-facilitate with the coach, as well as to move teachers along on that learning plan when the coach isn't there as well. That also means in this technological world we live in, another successful practice we see is supporting the project liaison in becoming familiar with this technology, in doing what we're doing today, being able to use Zoom, set it up in a group setting for their team, helping other teachers get on the computer. And that heads back into what I heard Christine say about helping people feel more comfortable with using these tools, using core tools, using Zoom, and being on the computer to plan, which is new for some people. So.
I think what you're talking about is really important, as we have some folks here who, we all have rural nooks and crannies of our state. Mm-hmm. I recently was in Rankin, Mississippi with Sherry, and it could be 45 minutes from one school to the next. Some of you are further. And so if we want to have this real-time professional learning community that's not so separate from our work, this idea of being able to Skype, Zoom, Google Hangout, or whatever easily is super important. And I love what you've given us here. You've just given us norms. It's like, if I want to make this great professional learning happen, I have to deal with some of the logistics and get people comfortable up front, or it never will happen. What are some lessons learned from you folks in terms of things you wish you would have known when you started this, in terms of, you've articulated some nice norms for us here. Just even the good old fashioned, whether you're virtual or in person, trying to begin and end on time. But anything else that's a key lesson learned?
I'll say one, and then Barbara, I'd love for you to offer some as well. It's a lesson we knew, but that I wish we'd applied earlier, which we often experience in our jobs, all of us. And that is, this is a set of norms that we've surfaced from watching PLCs do this work. And something we've learned is to really use this tool that you see in front of you with school site leads, administrators, and their teacher leaders, so that we can all rally around which of these norms we really want to support and work on building at the school site. And so this has become, these practices you see in front of you, this has become a really nice little tool to help us set a call to action at the end of a support visit with a school, or to help a coach and project liaison circle around the one thing they want to focus on to get the PLC moving. So Barbara, other thoughts?
Yeah, the one thing I wanted to highlight is, you may see this pattern throughout the list, is the involvement of the project liaison and the connection between that person and the coach. And I think that that's kind of the integral part of making a school successful, is that there is a site lead to work on a really close basis with a coach. So they're really a team to make sure everyone is on the right page. So we'll definitely hear from one of our project liaisons from New York in a little bit.
Yeah, Sherry has a good question in the chat. Do you have problems with teachers not taking virtual PLCs as important to show up for? We could have a whole nother meeting about that, but something that popped up in my mind when you asked that question, Sherry, was what's often interesting is norm setting when there is a group of people who are meeting in person, but a coach who's joining virtually. So often it's really easy for the people in person to lose themselves to old bad habits, right? Start dissolving into conversation about student behaviors, or have a lot of side conversations, or split into factions and do other work, whatever it might be. So something that we're seeing is successful to make sure people really are showing up with open minds and focus on that learning plan is to have people join from their own classrooms. And that gets really interesting because then we're creating virtual PLCs in a school building. Anything, Christine or Barbara, that you'd add to that?
Yeah, I would say that the strength of the project liaison is a huge factor in alleviating that issue, and also on the part of the coach, and this is something I learned the hard way, is setting your expectations at the beginning. So I expect you all to be here at such and such a time, and these are the things that you're going to have with you, and you operate accordingly, and people will follow your lead. But you kind of have to set the tone right from the beginning, and then it just becomes part of the process.
So sometimes we get so busy we want to dive into the good stuff right away, and you will pay for it if you don't do what Christine is saying. You will have to then try to course correct along the way. So literally things, and we'll hear from Kimba also in a few minutes, calling out how to manipulate your browser, or talking with people about here's what the download looks like, and modeling think, pair, shares. But being relentless up front in that friendly, pleasantly pushy school teacher way, y'all know what it is, about these kinds of things. Because our time is short and we care what we get out of it. Is super important. So great points, everybody.
Great. So one of the big questions that we're constantly thinking about is, how do we know how the teachers in our PLCs are doing? And in order to address that, what we utilize is the teacher learning reports in the analytics tab of Core Tools. So this is a great resource that I use as a grant director. I can look at each of the schools I'm working with and see the teacher engagement levels, but it's also something that we have constant conversations with the coaches about. So the coaches are constantly looking at the teacher learning reports for each of their schools. So if you take a look at this one quickly, you can tell which teachers are really engaging in the work and which aren't from the sample school. So here we see Jamie. She's looked at 112 modules, so she's doing a lot more. So she's highly engaged. Maybe that's a project liaison at a certain school who's really been diving into the work. And we could also tell who's struggling a bit more, and that's Jane Gallagher, who hasn't been looking at as many modules, who's only authored one as opposed to all of the other ones authored by other teachers in the group. And Christine, do you want to tell us how you use analytics as a coach?
Sure. I a lot of the time kind of use it for myself, to kind of check in and look at how many modules have comments, and take a look at the discrepancy between the modules that are authored and the modules that have that I've commented on, to make sure that I'm on top of everything. I found out today that in addition to all of the information here, you can also keep tabs on whether or not the teacher has linked their module to the learning plan, which is an important aspect of the I3 work. So that kind of gives me information, and I can go back to the teacher and just kind of remind them, you need to link it to the learning plan so that we can take a look at the content of your module. And then it's along the lines of what Barbara was saying, that it gives you a set. But the thing is, you also, as you get better acquainted with the analytics, there's a lot of reading between the lines that goes on too. Because you get to know, sometimes it might look like somebody's really active, that they've looked at a lot of modules, but then they're not doing a lot with them. So you have to be able to kind of you have to know your teachers. In addition to looking at the information, you have to know your teachers, and make sure that what you know about the teachers is being reflected in the analytics. And then if there's a discrepancy, you need to kind of look into that and figure out what's the discrepancy, why is it there, and is it problematic, or is it just you know, due to the way that the information is being shown. And then the other thing that Susan had brought up was the whole idea of mini tasks with comments. And sometimes we focus on the module as a whole, but often teachers are, you know, taking a module from the LDC library and they're making modifications. So you really want your comments to be on those mini tasks that they're authoring, because that's where their planning is really going. So I've been trying to work on that also, and making sure that I'm, you know, targeting those mini tasks so that I'm giving really specific feedback on the work that the teachers have done themselves.
Yeah, that's a really great point. Thank you. And also, just to add on a couple more things as a coach, for example, if you see Jane is less engaged than other teachers, you might want to reach out through email to offer additional support that way. We also had a principals meeting in New York City a few weeks ago, and we had all of the principals look at the teacher learning reports for their schools. So they are also aware of you know, who's participating more in the PLCs versus who's not as much. So they are able to check these kinds of reports often. And finally, I just wanted to quickly show you, we used a data analysis protocol at our coach meeting with all of the New York City and LA coaches a couple of weeks ago, and we all looked at a sample report and talked together about what do we notice about the data, what does it tell us and not tell us, and what are our next steps. So together as a team, we were able to you know, create norms around looking at the data and then thinking about how to proceed with the findings. All right, so I want to move on to give everyone the opportunity to hear from one of our New York project liaisons, Jen Berry. This is a photo of her right here with some of her first graders. And this was her first year in LDC, and she is a new project liaison. So Jen, do you want to tell us about your experience this year?
So this year is going well. It's a lot to take on, but we're excited about it. We are using the vertical team to develop LDC in the building and kind of spread word about it. Only 6 teachers in the building are using LDC right now. The way it works is there's 1 leader on every grade. We meet vertically once a week, where we're either meeting with Christine or we're working on our tasks in the modules and developing an understanding or using some of the documents that help us. Like, we really enjoyed the pitfalls about the checklist. So we meet once a week vertically and discuss a specific standard that the whole building's addressing. So it started off with W2, which is writing for information. And we looked across the building as to how the task increases in rigor and what it looks like in each grade. And then we developed our tasks and met again after we taught our modules and focused in on student work. And we noticed what gaps are there. And we built a standards chart focusing on the specifics in that standard, whether it be the introduction, the details. We noticed trends that were going on. So across our building, we noticed that the students were struggling with conventions. So then that moved us forward to developing next steps for conventions. So we picked the strategy of using a red and green crayon to notice capitals and periods. That was at least in grade 1, and that is shown in the video. And then we came back again, and we just keep discussing, like, okay, did you see anything? Did that change anything? Was it kind of compliant? Like, did the kids just get it for the moment? Or does it seem like they're holding on to the skills? So meeting vertically helps us discuss the gaps and the trends that we're noticing in the building. And then every week we also meet with our grade levels, so we can share out our conversations that we're having vertically. And now I'm getting excited because I think I'm going to start using an LDC module with my entire grade. So I'm looking forward to writing that over the February break. Not so relaxing, but we're going to do it. And I'm going to try to explain it to my grade, and then with our particular grade using it, we can then share out to the vertical team in the building about the strengths, the weaknesses, our next steps. And so, yeah, so the vertical team really works because it's every week we're either gaining information from Christine, our coach, who's like, this week we had a great meeting where we went exactly through a mini task and everybody had the same understanding as to what that should look like. So just having common knowledge and understanding, everybody having the same understanding and being on the same page, which often was a hardship in our building. We just felt like not everybody was getting the same message. So that's problems eliminated.
Yes, and everyone here has access to a reflective video that Miss Berry made teaching her first 1 week, 1 text module. So you can see video of her mini lessons. She talks about differentiating for her kids, and you'll be able to see her kids in action as well. All right.
Thank you for sharing.
Yeah, feel free to pop in any questions into chat for Jen if you have any. And we'll shift over to hearing from Christine one more time, and she'll share her experience coaching so far this year.
So, well, first, I just want to say that Jen and her team are like, you know, a coach's dream, because they have a really strong, we have a, strong project liaison, obviously. There's a really strong principal who protects the time, attends all of the PLC meetings, and the whole team is really on board with everything. So the consistency cannot be underestimated. And they just, they're just a pleasure to work with, and the growth has been unbelievable. So one of the really exciting things that we did actually just this week was I linked PS48, which is Jen's school, with PS211, which is another one of my I3 schools, and we had a collaborative Zoom with both teams of teachers, and I gave them an agenda ahead of time with just the focus of having everyone share their experience and kind of collaborate on what the successes have been. Are there any challenges that you're working through? Does anyone have suggestions on, what possible, some possible solutions? And we had a few technological glitches and stuff like that, but the content of the meeting was really deep, and I think everybody got a chance to contribute their learning and to kind of share some experiences. And everyone seems to feel like it was really beneficial. It was certainly beneficial for me. I learned a lot. And I think that the whole idea of intervisitation, whether it's virtual or in person, is really, really important if you can, swing it in some way, because I think that we all know as teachers you can be isolated sometimes, whether it's in your classroom or in your school, and it's always great to be able to share your experiences with teachers in the same city or across the country and learn from each other, and look at the way different teams of teachers approach problems, and just really collaborate in a different kind of way than I think a lot of teachers are used to.
Yep, and I popped in a link to the recording from that session here as well, so anyone can go ahead and take a look. All right.
Thank you so much for making these examples available to everybody to snoop in and learn from. I think that one of the things that you have really put out here is equity and professional learning for teachers. There are teachers who live in rural areas, or through their circumstances, maybe the only biology teacher for miles around and have nobody else to collaborate with. Whereas budgets are cut and those PD days become more and more precious, it's very difficult for people to have meaningful collaboration within the boundaries that they have. Thank you so much, folks, and please keep those questions in the chat coming. We're going to turn it over to 2 other team members who are also, I feel like between everybody who's presenting on this call, somebody is online every day. So I'm turning it over to Kimba and Danielle.
So I'm going to go ahead and kick off our next segment. As we've been working with, as you've been working with teachers, we constantly go back to the reality that tasks predict student performance. And so it always resonates that tasks for quality is where we need to get our teachers to. So what we have done several times with groups of coaches, and have tried to work with coaches as they work with teachers, is provide some tools and tips to be able to do some work around task feedback in a protocol that can be replicated to keep it at a professional and collegial dialogue. We notice a lot of times when we first start working with teachers around LDC is that sometimes this is the very first time that people are actually receiving feedback on lessons and assignments that they develop. So it can become very personal. And so incorporating protocols and norms can be a great way so that it takes away the personalization and it's all about the students and improving and, you know, sharing the successes and the challenges of the work. So I'm going to do a quick setup to frame the protocol that Kimba will be actually demonstrating with a group of panelists that we've so graciously been given ability for them to participate in this to demonstrate. But just really quickly, as far as the uses are concerned with this protocol, there are several steps in this protocol that are provided, but this can be used and tailored in different ways. So this could be used where it's a one-on-one session with a teacher, where you're face-to-face going through the protocol. You could be using this protocol at your desk by yourself while you're providing feedback. So it provides you a guide as to what you should be doing, providing feedback to your teachers' tasks through core tools, either through comments or through reviews. Or it could be used, as we're going to be demonstrating today, in a collaborative nature where we bring people together to workshop tasks in a way so that we can learn from each other, glean information from the great things that are going on with task development, and also keep things in our thinking cap as far as how we can take that and apply that to either our own tasks or with future tasks that we see from teachers in the future. So really quickly, the goal of sharing this with you all today is just so that you can experience and hear from other coaches around how they are providing feedback during the task design process to strengthen the assignment, and also be able to model this revision thought process in a virtual manner so that you guys can replicate this either virtually or face-to-face with your teachers. Just a really quick setup. If you are to do this with teachers, it's really important that all participants that are going to be available have access to the shared task so that they can provide comments and be able to view the task that's going to be workshopped. And then also, if you're doing it virtually or in face-to-face, the facilitator should make sure to project the task in core tools. Have that pulled up on the screen for the room to view. So again, I'm not going to go through each step, but we've provided each of these steps, and so we're going to do kind of a lightning round experience. So we'll see how it unfolds with our participants. But what this protocol gives, as I mentioned, is a guideline that can be tailored to how the conversation moves. So a lot of times you may only get through the first 3 steps. You may jump down to some additional steps as you work with these individuals more around their task. So real quick before I turn it over to Kimba, there are a few of what I call my handy dandy resources that I always have open when I do any kind of feedback, whether it be a virtual or face-to-face, or if I'm sitting down to do a review on my own. So I always have this protocol available, and so I've given you that Word document version that you can have available. So I print this off, and it kind of, again, gives me a guideline of how I want to start things through. I always have my Common Core standards document available, so that way I can see the language of the standards along with how it aligns for particular grade levels and how it progresses, as well as seeing the difference between the literature, informational, and the history and the science standards in terms of language. I also make sure that I always have the task template collection version 3.0 open. That way I can see what tasks they've chosen, but then also see what other tasks are available as possible options if for some reason I see something going on with the task template itself. Another great resources to go by is the Teaching Task Pitfall Checklist. Again, just to have it available. I may only check for 1, 2, and 3 in this particular time, or I may jump down and I know that I'm looking at those types. So keeping this handy is a really great way to identify some key places where maybe some stops and revisits for your teachers without being too overwhelming. I always have my LDC Core Tools Learn tab open. So that way, if I remember there's a great example or a great segment of content that I can refer my teachers back to so that they can go back and see an additional example or reread about focus standards, I can point them to that particular block. And then another really great one, I am a business teacher by nature. And so working with a number of different disciplines can be somewhat daunting sometimes. So this types of assignments charts breaks it down by discipline. And so these are great conversation starters around the types of assignments that are appropriate for particular disciplines, the different types of variations, what major traits are available in those types. And then what I really like about this too is it also provides specific LDC task templates that align really nicely with that writing type for each subject area. So I always have these charts pulled up as well to give me a little bit extra oomph in my repertoire. So I'm going to go ahead and turn this over. I'm going to stop sharing my screen and turn this over to Kimba. But while we're doing some transition, everyone in the chat, if you could provide, what other resources do you guys have as far as handy tools available in your toolkit when you go about providing feedback to your teachers that we didn't talk about? And I did not want to not introduce everyone, but Kimba is going to be our facilitator. We have Sherry Blankenship, Monique Wharton, Jane Ginn, and Jeffrey Lynn Davis, who will be our active participants in the task feedback protocol session that Kimba will administer. What I really like about this, if you saw on the slide, we're all virtual. We're all from across the country. We've got a Colorado, we got Alabama, we got Mississippi, Tennessee, and California, and we're all getting together to workshop this task together virtually. So I think that's a really cool thing.
So I see some really great comments starting to happen in the chat, and as people are wrapping those up, I'm going to go ahead and get all of our panelists going, and we're going to start working through the protocol. Just a reminder, I don't know if you saw it from Abby in the chat, that for panelists to go ahead and unmute so you can just join in the conversation. We're going to start just going through the process. I did put the task feedback protocol into the chat. So if everybody who's on this today wants to open that document up, because I'm going to have us focused on the task instead of the protocol, but we'll be using that protocol to guide our conversation. So it begins with reading the task. And so when we look at this task, it says, and I have to move the Zoom screen real fast. After researching informational texts on World War II, write a newspaper editorial in which you describe the 3 major ways that World War II changed Europe. I think I'm missing something right there. The Holocaust, the Cold War, and the rise of the superpowers, in parentheses. Support your discussion with evidence from the text. And so I know as a reviewer, I often jump to a lot of different thinking and ideas right from this point, and I want to dive in and give feedback. However, I found that the next step is super crucial. Before I go any further or even think of where to begin, I always go to the standards next. And so when you look at the standards, we have A social studies standard, Georgia performance standard, explain the impact of World War II in terms of the Holocaust, the origins of the Cold War, and the rise of superpowers. We have reading standard 5, describe how a text presents information, so sequentially, comparatively, causally, and writing arguments focused on discipline-specific content. So from here, now we got to start asking, do the standards drive the work of the task? Do we see evidence of them? And now is when I'm going to turn to our panel, and let's talk through it. What do you see as far as standards driving this task?
In the beginning, I saw that when I was looking at the first standard, the history social studies standard, that it really did, the task did match that. As large as it is, it's this huge focus standard, but it does match that particular one. And some suggestions that I made was that, I think it's always good to start with something good, that they did, match the social studies. My question was with them, when I went to look at some of the other standards, particularly the reading standard, I'm not sure that would be the focus standard that would that would support the content standard. So I asked questions about that in terms of, and giving them some other suggestions that they maybe, might try a different standard, or maybe this standard could be in a mini task, and kind of went that way. But your idea of looking at the standard was really helpful to me as a reviewer, because it gave me something tangible to hold on to and let me realize what the focus really has to be, the cognitive demands that we're making on the students. We're asking the students.
Well,
oh, go ahead.
Oh, I did the same thing. I'm looking at the standards, and they chose an informational template, but the standard they chose was argumentative. And so I kind of went, oh, wait a minute. Wait, now I'm confused. What are they asking the students to do? And are they asking them to describe them or explain them? And, all of a sudden it started whirling, and I went, oh, okay, I need to go back and look at the standards, look at the language of the standards, and see if there's some way I can come up to help them word it, or just make a decision on which part they want to work on. Where do they really want to go?
I think that to tag off of Monique, I agree in looking back at the way they wrote the task and then looking at the standard itself, looking at the verb of the content standard of explain can be a guiding piece. The one thing that I would say, like you said, Jane, in trying to find something that really positive to start with, you can tell that they are trying to include the language of the standard in the task itself. Now, I think that we definitely need some revision on it, but I like the fact that I'm seeing the actual language of the standard in the task itself in some kind of way.
And I think I appreciate that you pointed that out, Sherry. I'm wondering about warm openers, and that's what I noted, that they at least attempted to include the language of the standard in the task, even though the standard is very broad.
Very broad, yes.
Well, and what a great way to kick off the conversation with the teacher about, we understand that this is the standard. You have attempted to use the language, but then trying to unpack this standard even further in the conversations that you have with your teacher, so that you can really hone in on what do they really, really want to do in this particular module. What is the specific time where writing in response to reading is really crucial for this standard. I always go back to 1.3 in our course content around how does LDC fit within the curricula. A lot of times, especially with social studies, they do have these very dense standards, but it's really nice where that chart shows that, a module doesn't have to be a full unit. Right. Where can that module fit in with the unit where it's that, shorter sustained writing in response to reading. So that's a really great opener by starting out with a strong point where they're using the language of the standard, but how can we unpack that further to really hone in on what they want to do with this task?
And help them to see what they want to happen at the end. What's their end result?
Yep. Well, and I feel,
I'm
go
sorry,
ahead.
Emma. I was just going to say, Nicole Renner and I have been working virtually with some of our teachers this week on some tasks. And the question that she keeps asking that elicits really good information is what kind, and this is a question I would ask this teacher here based on what we see, what kind of thinking is it that you really want your students to do in preparation for writing? And that has opened up, teachers can say out loud exactly what they really want, and then it becomes very apparent that what they have here in Core Tools is not exactly what they just said. And so then we can begin to move from there.
And I think this teacher, in a way, gives a clue to that, because you're saying 3 major ways. So this teacher's really wanting the students to think about what are the most important pieces, and how did those impact Europe?
Well,
you know,
and I even think about kind of using some of that disciplinary stance and some of the work from 1.8 in the courses, as far as what is the content understanding when you start to unpack that impact of World War II in terms of the Holocaust, the origins of the Cold War, and the rise of the superpowers. And is it really about relationships, which is so fundamental to social studies, right? Relationships and perspectives and how things fit together and how one thing led to something else. And even thinking about that impact, and maybe how some of the things of World War II caused the rise of the superpowers. So maybe we're thinking of some kind of causal relationship, which you almost see a little bit in their choice of reading standard now. And maybe they are looking for a causal relationship, and that's what they're getting at. And so there's all these really great points to dig in to see how they made these choices and what are those questions that we're going to ask to get to that. And I agree, Sherry. I think that question of what is the thinking work you want your students to do, or what is your goal in this module, helps get them talking so you know where those entry points are. And I find for myself, what I'll do is I'll take a lot of notes. I'm going to show something really quick. I actually, this was the original one. I have it on my other computer. But I actually created notes in all of these points on here for what I wanted to say at each step of the protocol, right? Like Monique's giggling as we prepare for the deep dives and some of the work with teachers, you come in with a whole lot of options, right? And you let the conversation guide which options then you lead with. So like Danielle was making a connection to 1.3 and where a module fits within a unit, you could have these things in standby of other possible templates or choices or possible language to give them ideas, because sometimes they just get stuck, right?
Well, and as I mentioned in the setup, you know, we literally have only gone through 1, 2, and 3 in terms of the protocol. But based on the conversation, we have kind of bounced around through 4, 5, 6, 7, and 8 based on what each of us have seen and have suggested as far as feedback. So in terms of having a preparation beforehand, this is a really great method that Kimba's sharing, is just having stuff on the ready, not to overwhelm them, not to send them every single comment that you have, but pick some high leverage things that are really going to push them forward. They feel like they can make progress and to improve this task to quality.
Well, and Kimba passed this helpful hint along to me as we were working on the deep dives, and because I tend to go scatter, it really helped me stay focused, and I had it in front of me on my screen. I have one now with notes on this particular task. I also, of course, y'all may not be able to see it, but I have a highlighted paper copy because I'm just old and that's the way I do things. But it really does help to have your world focused that way. And the protocols helped me think through, what am I saying and what's the most high leverage, impactful comment I can make instead of scattering it.
So I know that we're running out of time. So to wrap things up, though, I do want to open this up to the rest of the participants. We provided a link to the module itself. And you saw that Jane had actually gone in and added many of her comments in the comment bubbles on the module itself in different areas. So I encourage you as participants, if you're not on the panelists, to provide any additional feedback that you might have seen as you were exploring this task. You can either put it in the chat, or you can open up that module that we just linked in the chat, and you can actually put the comment bubbles in there as well. So kind of practice that feedback that you can use virtually, so that if this was a task you were sharing back with teachers later after a workshopping session, they have all of those comments right there in the work that they're doing. So I really liked how Jane did that in putting those comments right there in the module. So that way the teacher had that to reference back to after the conversation that they have.
Thank you so much, Danielle. I think I heard someone who's going to speak. Go ahead.
I was just going to say that this protocol, watching it unfold, one of the things that I think is beautiful about it that we haven't said yet is what happens time and time again seems to be that the protocol focuses you, like you said, Monique, and we can be all over the place. But the other thing that happens is when you start to ask the questions and you hear what the teacher really intends, you put it back in the teacher's court. It becomes their choice again. And so you really are coaching them to where they wanted to be in the first place. You're helping them learn how to write themselves into where they wanted to be.
Yeah.
And Sherry, that is so wise. And as we kind of go into wrapping, I think you'll agree the two powerful segments today around the same theme. I'd like to, before we just do a few reminders, kind of like the end of the faculty meeting, it's just to do a negative cognitive step back around your point, Sherry. I often call Kimba the coach's coach. Because if we want students to develop certain abilities, what are the most powerful moves that a coach can be making? What you have exemplified in this call is not telling, but spending the time as a coach, not making clip art on PowerPoints, not that we don't like to do that sometimes. What is your time spent doing? Think about that for a moment. Your time is spent on guiding the work, planning your moves. What you have done is planned out your coaching moves around the artifact and around the standards, so that you were not giving teachers a dictate, make your module rated by this. It was all about the teacher's intention, the intention of the standards, the teacher. And I just wanted to just pull that out again. I would love as we, I'd love you to just think about that for a moment while I switch gears and make some comments in the chat or out loud to each other. And I'm just going to change screens for just a moment.
So while Barb is also doing that, I do want to mention that if you enjoyed sitting through and listening to this task workshopping session using the task feedback protocol, we will begin offering a monthly task workshopping session open for you to come. We'll have opportunities for individuals to submit their tasks to be workshopped, but it's just another opportunity for us as coaches to get together, workshop tasks together, hear feedback from one another, and build our feedback bank of ways that we can work with our teachers to improve tasks. So I just wanted to bring that up. We'll be getting out information on those monthly task workshop sessions to you very, very soon.
And also, those are part of our coordinated support to coaches. We are offering national coach credentialing. Several states are really working on this through their State Department of Eds, through large school districts, and people on their own are exploring this to continue to become more accomplished as coaches. The skills you learn as an LDC coach transcend LDC. I always tell people if you can see the LDC, you're probably doing it wrong, because it's classic backwards design, formative assessment, accomplished teaching. So anybody on our team's happy to talk more about that with you. I'd like to just do a quick whip through a few slides here to let you know a few reminders. In case you missed it, please check out the January Community Spotlight. That's our great monthly happenings newsletter. Also, our partners facing history have released 3 short modules in conjunction with some real core content from their website. And also, we have a new mini task template from the National Boards project that really hits that differentiation and reflection. Also, there are great teacher stories in ASCD, many from SRAB projects. I'd like to thank everybody. Many of you were here at Stevenson Elementary, took time out to go to Florida and learn together about the power of guaranteed curriculum. And we are getting ready to descend on Rankin County, Mississippi with Sherry Blankenship, who's here in the house, April 5th through 7th for a different Coach Institute. And actually some of the things you saw today are variations of what we're going to be working on. You can register now, and that's in partnership with SREB. I also want to give a nod to the Nashville SREB conference this summer, where we're also looking at doing some additional peer review workshops after the conference. Our next coach meeting for the year will be on April 13th. We'd love to see you there. I hope that what you're finding are things that you can pick up and use that are supports for you in the work with your teachers, and that also if you feel like you're part of a growing community. I'd love for you to end today by putting a comment in the chat, letting us know what you're thinking about, what you're going to try, throwing in something you can share, or letting us know how we can help you further, what you'd like to see in April. Thanks all, and also at the end of the PowerPoint is some of our contact information. Thank you, everyone.